We begin our series on love with one of my favorite stories from the Gospel of Luke, the story of Zacchaeus. And in it we hear a story of God's hospitality, God's welcome, and God's agape love. It starts out with Jesus heading to Jericho. Jericho is close to Jerusalem. And throughout the whole Gospel of Luke, Jesus is on the way to Jerusalem. He's on the way to Jerusalem because it is there in the holy city that God seeks to restore God's people. Restore them not by military might, not by powers, but by love. A love that brings in the outsider. A love that finds a place for the one who has been excluded. Now, Jericho had a bit of a bad reputation. It was kind of an irreputable kind of place, full of scum and villainy. And so we shouldn't be so surprised that when Jesus goes through Jericho, he encounters a tax collector by the name of Zacchaeus. Early on in Jesus' Gospel of Luke, he welcomes tax collectors. One of his disciples, Levi, Matthew, is a former tax collector. And as a group, this group they were despised by the good and holy people, because their job was to collect money for the occupying Roman government. And so many saw them as traitors or collaborators. They colluded with the enemy. And so when Jesus starts to welcome tax collectors, when he sits at their table, he shares a fellowship with them, the good and holy people, which are epitomized by the Pharisees, find it slightly troubling. And now here, one of the last stories before Jesus enters Jerusalem. In the town, the villainous town of Jericho, a chief tax collector is met. And at this point, this tax collector, Zacchaeus, he climbs a tree. He's short in stature. Now, I could go into a whole bunch of short jokes here. I'm not going to. But it is one way of illustrating Zacchaeus' size, illustrates that he is in low esteem with the crowd. They won't part their way. They won't make way as they would for a good, reputable person. And so he has to climb up a tree. And Jesus goes and he says to Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus, come on down, because I must stay at your house today. I must stay at your house. Jesus here is referring to sort of like it's part of his mission. It's part of his purpose. Just as he must travel to Jerusalem, so too must he welcome those who are outsiders. Why? Well, I think it has something to do with agape. God's unearned, generous love that reaches out in radical hospitality, and it brings in the lost. It seeks out the lost, and it seeks to put together a new community, a resurrected community, a community that cares for the poor, the orphans, the discarded. A community that makes space for outsiders and aliens. This community, which later we find in the sequel to Luke's Gospel, which is the book of Acts, is the early church. This is the community that we have inherited through baptism. This community, founded in Christ, is given God's radical love. And it makes each of us a part of it, no matter where we've come from, no matter what we've done. The forgiveness, the grace of God brings us together. It seeks out the lost part of each of our souls. And it is that grace, that hospitality, that agape, that creates and brings in a new kingdom. Jesus' kingdom. It is that kingdom that we're invited to live in this day. A couple questions for you this week. Where do you experience hospitality? Who welcomes you? And not only who welcomes you, but who do you welcome? Who do you find it easy to have sit at your table? Go a little deeper. Who is hard? Who would you rather not show up? Who would you rather be at a distance, hidden by the crowd? How might we be inspired by God's agape to love in a different way? In a way filled with gracious hospitality, in a way that goes beyond our comfort zones and what we think is possible. How might we, in our lives, participate in Jesus' life? That's it for this session. Next session, we'll look at another story and we'll explore friendship and love that binds us together. God bless you, and thanks for following along.